Hello, everyone, and welcome to our US What Matters 2024 event. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. For the next half hour, we'll be bringing our 2024 What Matters report to life, sharing the regenerative values that matter the most to US consumers today based on our global What Matters survey. Before we get into the session, I'm going to cover just a few housekeeping items. During the session, please add your questions to the Q&A box, and our team will be sure to follow up with you following the webinar. Additionally, in the bottom right corner of your screen, you will find a links tab where you can download the full What Matters report and a link to a satisfaction survey where you can let us know how you enjoyed today's session. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. We have Catherine Eflin, Managing Director of North America here at Humanate, and Michael Thomas, Senior Vice President of North America for Space Doctors, our cultural sister agency at Humanate. Michael, over to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And first off, thanks for everyone for joining. You're going to hear a little bit about, again, like it was said, what matters in 2024. We're going to go into a little bit of depth there, and we're going to talk a little bit about the behaviors that are following some of those aspirations. And then use this knowledge to explore how brands like yours can really support people in fulfilling those needs. So let's just jump right in. So starting off, maybe the first thing to note is that people are just really increasingly dissatisfied with the way the world is going. And this is true across a whole diversity of spectra. Agree or not, whether they're right or wrong about any particular bit of it, essentially it's pretty consistent. People are just not exactly happy with the way things are going. And what's going on is they're becoming increasingly aware of their own lack of agency and having any ability to make the changes that they believe are necessary at the scale that they want them changed. So they're more aware of these essentially power asymmetries between institutions, companies, governments, things like that, and their own power. This is due in part because of higher cost of living, inflation, and then the continued growth and reach of institutions that do have the capacity to do something about it don't appear to be doing what is making people happy. So people are really looking for something big to happen, and they just can't do it on their own. So before we dive into what this is, everyone's favorite exercise, if I were to ask ChatGPT about, what are trends, what's trending. Now, ChatGPT is old data, right? And so you could see this is all the stuff that I'm sure we've all read for years that is the same kind of bullet points. The only thing missing here might be like something like seamless connectivity. But I think the real trick is that at a high level, we keep hearing the same things. We all know what the high level is, but the real trick is to understand, well, what does it actually mean for people? What does it mean besides some abstraction, some set of language and some set of tropes? What does it actually look like in people's lives? So that's what we're going to be looking at. That's what this report was all about, is looking in detail and really trying to extract and understand, what does this stuff actually mean? So as we get on to the content, first I'm going to take a moment to talk a little bit about the method behind it all. How did we actually uncover what all this means, what people really want in 2024? And so the first part about our method was expert cultural analysis. So I'm part of Space Doctors, and this is what we do. And we employ anthropologists and semioticians and cultural analysts to examine culture, examine how things are changing, how they're shifting, and use that work to kind of frame what comes after it. And what's really critical about that is starting out with a really keen understanding of not just the how and not just the what, but the fact that those are inextricable. Now, with that knowledge, we complement that with a combination of qualitative interviews with leading edge consumers, essentially from our network. We call the Illum Network, but essentially these are leading edge kind of cultural change makers, people who are really kind of pushing the conversation. We do qualitative interviews with them, and then we combine that with AI-enabled data analytics of large corpora of language, essentially online language, official documentation, things like media and journal articles and things like that, but also user-generated content as well. Now we triangulate that against our next set of methods that are essentially co-creation activities with our global insight community. And this is over 10 different regions where we are kind of co-creating some of the insights that we get through the cultural analysis and through our qualitative interviews and analytics to really get a refined sense of how they show up. And then finally, in order to scale that, we quantify that over 17 markets. So this was a quantitative survey as over 13,000 people, again, in 17 different markets, to really make sure that those insights are robust. So what do we hear? So here's some of the things that our consumers are telling us. So one, they have an expectation that people, organizations, brands have a clear vision and are taking a lead to drive some of the changes. Again, people are dissatisfied with the way the world is going. They're not empowered entirely to do anything about it themselves. They need the help. That's where these asymmetries of power are. They're also telling us that we need to make the best use of existing systems and resources to maximize their potential. And they're telling us that when change needs to happen, when you're making change, that the people you need to talk to, the voices you need to hear, are the people that are most affected by whatever needs changing. So essentially, people who have experienced injustice, people who have experienced inequity, these are the people that are going to be most sensitively attuned to what solutions actually work. Now, what we notice is that a couple things. First, there's a clear generational trajectory toward both what people are saying they want. There's stronger and stronger voice of that, but then also in aligning people's words to their actions. So it's very clear that as from generation to generation, it's getting louder and people are taking more action. Now, what you do notice here is that there is a big gap. There's a big gap between what people say they want and the actions that they're currently able to take to enact that vision. And in some ways, the gap is overdetermined. So we've seen a lot of different reasons for it. One is that people just don't know what to do or how to do it for a change that they want. So for example, you see this with recycling electronics. People just don't really know how to recycle electronics in a secure way, in a safe way. So there's a gap that is attributable to people not knowing how to act on it. There's also that people know what they want to do, but they just need support. They're not able to do it themselves, lack of power, lack of authority, lack of access. And then there also may be a disconnect between just ideology and people's own lived experiences, what people's what people say their expression of their values are, and then what that actually looks like in real life. But in some ways, it kind of doesn't matter. There's enough, it's overdetermined, as I said, what the gap is. What's really important, though, is that's where the opportunity lies. That's where the opportunity is to align what people's values, what people are saying that they need, with what their behaviors are. So going back to when we looked at the trends overall, and there's a lot of diversity there in terms of how people are framing what a positive change looks like, what a better world looks like. It's useful to kind of put a name to it. And what we've seen is that there's a shift from not just from extractive systems to sustainable systems, but in fact, there's a shift from sustainable to this idea of regenerative systems. And what we mean by that is that there's not a whole lot of excitement for sustaining systems that aren't even working as they are right now. So again, people are feeling that the world is just not going in the direction that they want it to go in, and there's no value in sustaining that whatsoever. In fact, even the word sustainable has come to mean so many different things. It can mean anything from generalized goodwill to ideas of Gaia on one hand, all the way to grift and greenwashing and Havel's greengrocer on the other hand. So what people are really looking for is some meaningful change that connects to their values and their lives in a tangible way, not in an abstract way, not in an extractive way, and not in a way that just sustains, again, systems that aren't doing anything for them. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about regeneration. So in some ways, this is not really new. I mean, companies have been investing in ESG for quite a long time now, and ostensibly trying to achieve some of these holistic goals. And what's going on, we're also seeing at a time when people are pulling away from that. People are backing away from their ESG goals. So in some ways, that's determined by a lot of different things. There's political, financial, cultural reasons for this. But what's really important to note there is that why do companies feel that now is a time to really start backing away from this, right at a time when people's voices are getting louder and their behaviors are actually changing in ways that they want a positive future? Why is that the case? So that's really what we want to dig into here and really kind of explore, what does it mean to actually make a positive change? And we find it's not about ideology. It's not about bumper stickers. It's about really deeply understanding someone's lived context and what matters to them and how to make a difference in a tangible, meaningful way. So people haven't stopped caring. If you look at the data, people are getting louder about it. They're making changes. People's expectations are growing. And essentially what they're saying, that companies do need to stand for something, but it needs to be unambiguous. It needs to be aligned with the people that they serve. It needs to evince a deeper knowledge about their own lives, their values. It needs to be evident in the things that they make and the services they provide, basically regenerating value. So essentially stand for something, stand behind it, but you have to actually prove it. And even if what you're standing behind is a very assertive political neutrality, that's fine. Own it, live it, and prove it, and don't resort to, for example, just talking points. So what this means then is that there really is not a one-size-fits-all approach. So what separates regenerative value creation from just ideology or bumper stickers or checklists is that it needs to be deeply cognizant of the context that it's in. And that context is incredibly diverse. So what is positive change? What does it look like for people? We're actually going to look at some pretty concrete examples from some of the brands that you see here to really dive in, to move away from the abstractions and actually get into what change looks like. And so while on one hand, you can say, yes, it depends, and it's really diverse, it would be helpful to have some kind of structure behind what positive change really looks like. And this is what we did. When we analyzed our data, we looked at different types of changes because context is different and we have different audiences, we have different value systems, and we're going to need to know what is the right fit for that. So we've looked at, for example, one way of positive change is courageous vision. This is all about looking for bold ideas and visions that are really revolutionizing how we think and how we act. That's one way to enact positive change. Another is through empowering minds. So this is all about enabling, empowering everyday people to become the change makers themselves. Another way to look at positive change is all about surgical solutions. So these are looking for precise and focused actions that can have an exponential impact. And finally, one way to think about positive change is about rethinking and thriving, challenging conventional paths and exploring alternative forms of organization. So this is a diversified set of kind of modes of enacting change that are going to be appropriate for different contexts. And that's what we're going to dive into a little bit. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Catherine, if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So for each of the 4 codes that Michael just covered, the dimensions, there are specific cultural codes that map into each of them. You're seeing those on the screen here. In the full report, we dive into each of them. But for the purposes of today and to stay within time and relevance, we're going to focus on just 3 of those. And those are manifesting manifestos, inventive applications, and the director's chair. So those are the 3 we'll focus on. So the first one is called manifesting manifestos. This fits in the dimension that Michael talked about called courageous vision. This idea that we need really bold ideas and visions to revolutionize the way that we think and act. And so when we're talking about manifesting manifestos, it's really this idea that we need to challenge existing norms and lead with a fresh perspective, not only having a voice for change, but being that catalyst to bring it all to life. And so let's dive into a little bit of what we heard in our research about this from consumers and from people in general. And what they tell us is they're really looking at brands and organizations to have a compelling vision on how they're going to have a positive impact in the world. And that's because they know it's a challenge to understand what it is we need to do and what's going to work. Most importantly, what they tell us is it cannot be a PR stunt. And that it's going to take brands and people working together to really make this happen. Now, we saw the high-level data early on, but this is where we start getting into some of the generational gaps that Michael mentioned. So if you look at this here, what you see is that while both the younger generations, which are on the left, and the older generations on the right, feel like this is important and they identify it with it, what you see is the younger generations not only feel more strongly about it, but they're actually acting upon it, and they expect this from brands. More than half are choosing to engage with brands that are showing up in this way. And so, my takeaway from this would be not only are they talking the talk, they're walking the walk. And that's going to have an impact on brands as we move into the future. And so a couple of examples, if we wanted to explain what does this look like out in the marketplace. Not going to cover Patagonia because I feel like we've all heard that example a million times. But important in all these examples are, it's not just about sustainability. It's not just about the environment. So the first one I'm going to bring to you is Bombas. Bombas is, in Latin, that stands for bumblebee. And so think of that as this group of small animals working together for the better of the hive. And that's what Bombas is all about. The number one most requested donation from homeless shelters are socks. Socks are a very small clothing item, but it makes a big difference to someone who needs them. So for every pair of socks Bombas sells, they donate one to a homeless shelter. So this is really marrying product and purpose. In addition, for every new employee, they give them a dozen pair of socks to go out and hand out in the community to people in need. A second example is Allbirds. Allbirds is a shoe manufacturer, and their goal is to be carbon net zero by 2030. And so that is at the forefront of everything they're doing within the manufacturing process. People who love Bombas, and they have really built, Allbirds, they have really built some long-standing loyalty. And people don't buy them because of the price. They don't buy them because of the styling. They buy them because they agree with Allbirds' value system. And when they wear their Allbirds out, they know they're making a statement about what they believe in. And so that's how these two brands are really making this come to life. We want to give you some examples as we go through the presentation today of work we've done at Humanate that also falls into each of these three categories we're going to discuss. So this first one is a leader in credit insurance services to farmers and ranchers. And they really see themselves as being a valued financial partner. And even more than that, they have a really fierce commitment to meeting the needs and removing any friction from the experience they have with the brand. And so one of the things this brand knows is that sustainable agricultural practices is becoming increasingly important. And so they developed an internal panel to understand what is that all about? What does it mean? What are some of the financial or financing barriers that might be preventing people from adopting these practices, particularly when you think about the capital investments involved and how their products and services might overlay that. And so what we've done is we've created a proprietary panel of farmers and ranchers so that we can talk to them about what do they want in this space, what do they need, what are the things that are getting in the way of them doing what they want to do. With this information, this brand is going to go back and relook at their portfolio of brand offerings, services, and make sure that it's all aligned to what their clients want. The next code I'm going to cover is inventive applications. And this is really about using existing systems or networks, supply chains to create something new. Because the reality is we do not have unlimited resources. So it's really going to take some out-of-the-box thinking to look at what we have, maybe what we've forgotten that we have, and find new and inventive life for them. So again, when we talk to consumers, what do they think about this? For sure, they talk about this idea of seeing something that's not being used and then seeing it repurposed into something that benefits many. So think of rail to trails, right? A lot of us use those. It's a great example of this. They acknowledge, though, that it doesn't only take sort of the thought and awareness that this needs to happen, but it takes a real passion to spark that change. And so in the end, the idea is how can we use fewer resources and the ones that we do have to their full potential so that we can drive positive change. This is one that when we look at the data, it seems that everyone identifies with this one. Everyone can agree. But what we do see is that the younger generation is more activated on it. And it might just be because they know how to do it. Michael talked about the electronics recycling early on. I think that's a great example of we all have printers, computers, monitors sitting in closets, basements, garages, because we're not really sure how to get rid of them. We know not to take them out to the trash, but we're not really sure what to do with them or how to do it. It might just be the younger generation knows more there. And so how can brands help with that? It's a real opportunity to help your customers do what they want to do. How can you help enable that? In terms of examples of what this looks like out in the world, I'm going to share a couple of examples. The first one is a local Metro Detroit nonprofit called Forgotten Harvest. And Forgotten Harvest delivers on average about 150,000 pounds of surplus food a day to people and families who are food insecure across the metro area, providing them fresh, healthy, nutritious food to eat. And in addition to this, they have a program called the Youth Snack Program, and this is for kindergarten through 12. And what this is they provide snacks to these programs for maybe their summer enrichment programs, after school academic support. And so the kids can come and not only can they get a fresh, healthy, nutritious snack, which isn't always available to them at home, they also get the added tutoring, educational support that they need. So it's a real win-win. Another really good example of that is Coca-Cola. In Africa, they are partnering with an organization called Last Mile, and they use their refrigerated delivery trucks that are already delivering product to also deliver much needed medical supplies, vaccines for things like malaria and TB to remote villages that wouldn't otherwise have access to these medical supplies, or certainly not on a timely basis. So it's a great example of using a resource that's always available. When we think about what this might look like in work we've done here, I think the point of this next example is it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be $1 million investment. It can be very simple things that we can do even within our insights functions. So think about shelf tests. We've all done shelf tests for years, and typically what we do is go into shopper labs or actually go into store. Well, we partnered with one of our food manufacturing clients to think about how could we do this differently, and how could we reduce the impact of this research on the world. And so in this case, what we did was we used virtual reality technology, and we embed that into mobile surveys and had people do shelf tests that way. And we could collect all the behavioral data, marry that with the traditional quant data we collect. And this was a great way to develop insights that simply had less of a impact as we did it. So there are lots of technologies available to us as professionals we can be using in inventive ways. The final example I want to share is within the dimension of empowered minds. And so remember, that's this idea of empowering ordinary people to become change makers. Because more often than not, the key decision makers are not those that have experienced injustices or necessarily even know what needs to change. And so the director's chair is all about giving a platform to people who have the vision for change, but maybe because of societal barriers haven't had the chance to act. So that's what this one is all about. And when we talk to people about thoughts on director's chair, it really is this idea of ensuring that all voices, all perspectives, and all experiences are heard and considered in what we're doing. Because they recognize that marginalized populations not only know what needs to change, they're going to be the best ones to help solve it, because they come with empathy. They have a realistic understanding of what it's going to take to make this change. But again, there's a recognition here that it's going to take brands and people together to solve this one. This is one where, once again, we see the generational differences at play. I feel like we've all heard how important this idea of leveraging diverse voices has become to our culture as a whole, and particularly to the younger generations. And so you have to believe that the younger you are, or the younger generations, we're seeing that they are choosing brands that authentically demonstrate this. And more importantly, they are shying away or actively avoiding brands that they think are inauthentically, ungenuinely doing this, or flip-flop on how they're thinking about it. So that's a really important thing for brands to recognize. Examples of director's chair in play. The first I want to share with you is L'Oreal. And they have a program called Beauty for a Better Life. It's a global training program really focused on teaching people about hair and makeup. And the folks that are brought into this program are most often living in really difficult living situations. They might be socially or environmentally vulnerable, might be victims of violence. And this training program gives them a safe place to gain skills and confidence. And in Vietnam, one of the locations that this has been happening, 100% of the people graduating from this program go on to find jobs. So that's great. Another example, one of my personal favorites, is the Restaurant of Mistaken Orders. I think many of us probably have people in our lives who have suffered from dementia, and it's a very sad and lonely disease. Well, this restaurant hires people who are suffering from dementia as servers. And the great thing here is it allows the patrons to gain more of an empathy and understanding, because clearly they know this is part of the model, but also the folks suffering from dementia a chance to regain some social interaction and combat loneliness. So it's really a beautiful example. An example that we'd like to share with you in terms of what we've done here at Humanate is some partnership we have with a large entertainment and media brand. And their goal was to really have a deeper understanding of the Black digital voice. And the reason for this is they want to build empathy and better communicate the value of these consumers to their stakeholders. And so what we did was we learned that in order to gain and leverage truly inclusive insights, it's going to take a lot of intentionality and focus. And to elevate the voices of minority groups and leverage their voices in a way that betters society, we've really got to make sure that we are being truly inclusive of these groups, making sure that they have a safe and comfortable space to share their lived experiences. And so as we thought about this, the team was diverse and integrated throughout the concept through moderation and production. So we were very thoughtful about that. Here's a video we want to share. I think important to note, PowerPoint is not always the way you're going to build empathy with people. And so this is a video we produced along for this effort.
Online and in the physical world, the Black community doesn't just passively consume. They create, they innovate, they build, they inspire. That's why digital culture is Black culture. Black consumers aren't a niche, and they shouldn't be an afterthought. Black consumers aren't a fraction of a multicultural pie. They're uniquely and highly influential audience. In a world of spaces not designed for them, Black digital users adapt and innovate, transforming these same spaces into something better. But just showing up isn't enough. To win with Black consumers, you have to see, understand, respect, and value Black consumers. But is it worth it? Hell yes. Black people bring all that they are to the physical and digital spaces they occupy. And they're a lot more than just consumers. They're the future. The future of digital is Black, unapologetically. Are you ready?
Okay, and so to wrap us up, I just want to leave you with a couple thought starters on things you can do, because ultimately actions are going to speak a lot louder than words. As you're thinking about what your brand stands for, make sure you're getting close enough to consumers to really understand, does that align with what they want and need? And does your brand, is it actually able to deliver on that value proposition? Are you bringing the right voices in and bringing them in early enough, not as a reaction to what you're doing, but as part of the creation process? And any of these efforts don't need to cost anything. Tap into your employees. They have great ideas, and you're going to drive engagement within your organization by showing them how much you care. And then ensuring that you're creating safe avenues for all voices to be heard. And that's going to start with a culture of inclusivity within, an awareness of where all of our own personal biases come in, as well as how to build empathy for each other. I think a great example of what all of this looks like is a letter that I saw on LinkedIn, and it was from the CEO of Fjallraven, which is a clothing and gear company. And the idea is they take a lot of care in their manufacturing, one, to make it as sustainable as possible, but also make sure that it's durable. Their ask of us is wear the shoes. Don't throw them away after one season. If they need to be repaired, get them repaired. Give them to someone else. Sell them on the secondhand market if that's what you want to do. But just don't throw them away. And so I think the takeaway from this is, you know what, this is really a two-way street. It is not all on the shoulders of brands. It is not all on the shoulders of consumers. There is accountability for all of us in this. And together we can drive positive change.
So that brings us to the end. We hope you found it informative. I hope you found it inspirational as well. In order to create a better experience for future sessions, we'd love to hear back, get some feedback from you. You can click the pop-up on your screen now and take a 2-minute survey, or click the link in a follow-up email with an on-demand recording. So again, if you drop the question in the question box, we'll be sure to get your question answered via email shortly. If you have additional questions, please feel free to email either Catherine or myself. Lastly, the webinar is recorded, and thank you, and have a good rest of the day.